no two players articulate the same way. So this is all what a combination of what we're commonly taught and then what I found for me. So usually what people are taught as reed players to articulate is to tongue on the offbeats. So instead of like ta, 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 you're gonna go ooh, da, ooh, like this. And you could do that with scales or whatever, okay? I would recommend getting used to that with even eighth notes, with swung eighth notes, whatever, at all kinds of different tempos. Even if you don't agree with it, mastering things always helps. Remember, not everything you practice is something you're going to use, but that doesn't mean don't practice it. Anything you practice will make you better. So, the next good idea, I think, is John McNeil is a jazz trumpet player who had a great book called The Art of Jazz Trumpet, and it's pretty much all about articulation. And he starts off with the tonguing the offbeats like that, and then he gets into groups of 2 and 3. So you can make scale patterns and stuff. Say you want to practice tonguing and or emphasizing the first of each 3 eighth notes. For example, whatever. So, but then you could combine groups of 2 and 3. So, say 3 plus 2. So I'll just make up a scale pattern where it would be, but on each second of triad of those, I'm going to only do 2, so that's a group of 2. And as McNeil points out in the book, that gets you into anticipating or delaying the chord changes that always happen on the downbeats, right? That way you won't accent a downbeat just because it's on the bar line. That's another contrarian thing in jazz, to say never accent downbeats. Like, all right, anyhow, I don't want to get into all that. So you could also do 2, 2, 3. That'd be like a 7. Whatever. All right. And then what I found for me personally is that the clarinet, if I'm getting my emphasizing notes by adding to the volume I already naturally play, which when you're playing jazz, you got to play as loud as you can on this thing especially. But if I'm playing that loud and then accenting on top of that to get the emphasis, the clarinet just gets more and more obnoxious, especially because I mostly play upper registers to be heard. And when I took a break from playing clarinet a lot, I just realized, like, that's a big problem with the clarinet, is how high-pitched it is and how obnoxious that can be if it's loud. Not that that's always bad, but you need a loud, boisterous environment around you, meaning the band and the drums, to help cushion that sound and make it fit in. Because there's been times where I would go for like wild, loud clarinet with a polite rhythm section, and I would just sound obnoxious. So, speaking of which, all these things, like how swung the eighth notes are, what kind of articulation, that depends on the mood of the song, the kind of beat the song has, and how the band plays too. So you want to not be dogmatic about any of these. So I'd recommend practicing all of it, tonguing every note, slurring every note, all of it. All right, so anyhow, what I was saying is that what I found for me personally is that for the clarinet, a better approach would be to take away from my volume, and then the notes that I'm around, those notes that I'm taking away, pop out. And so the notes that are popping out are my normal volume, and I'm taking away around that. So that's when you get into ghosted notes. So ghost tonguing, saxophone players do it all the time. You put your reed on the tongue and do a TH sound, basically, like instead of ta, ta, or da, da, you're going tha, tha, tha. THAW, for example, like you're thawing chicken. Anything frozen. So when we're taught sometimes proper starting a note from nowhere on a reed instrument, we're taught put your tongue on the reed, get your air ready, and then release, because when your tongue's on the reed, nothing comes out. That's not necessarily true. You can play a lot of stuff on clarinet with your tongue slightly on the reed. I'm going to have my reed on the tongue once I start the first sound. So you'll notice I turn extra red. I always turn red when I play. But that's because when you have that on there, you have to blow extra hard in a way. So it is tiring. But it's less tiring in the approach I'm about to talk about when I'm taking away than if I was to ghost by not huffing in notes and then huffing on others. It's almost like, I always feel like that's just like exhausting and like hyperventilating almost. So it's easier to put the tongue on and off. So what I'd recommend is doing what I just did and practice playing clarinet with your tongue all the way on. And then for the upper register, you really have to start the note. Try to put your tongue on it a little bit and get used to that muffled sound. So we're turning the tongue into a muffler instead of an on and off switch. See, yeah, you can still hear the note, but it's like muffled, like a mute. I'm not playing soft, it's just I'm putting my tongue, like if I release my tongue after I do that, hear the difference? So what happens is now, if I was to tongue on the offbeats but be ghost tonguing, now I'll be emphasizing the downbeats, and then you get a mixture. And anytime you mix offbeats and downbeats, you're going to get odd numbers, which gives you that interesting syncopation over the bar line thing. And then another thing I found with ghost tonguing is that what works nicely is that, we're taught for big band rhythms and stuff, when you have a phrase that ends on the and, the offbeat in swing, and that's the last note of the phrase. You got to go dot and stop it with your tongue. Do dot. And I remember Bergonzi was always saying that, at least when you're playing by yourself, that sounds pretty bad. You got to have he called it something about how when water balloons pop, you hear a little bit. So what I figured out is that if I'm doing that, it sounds good to first put ghost tongue on the reed to cut off the note, but still have it muted so it's still going, and then maybe after that actually cut off the note. So instead of, which especially on clarinet can be so stiff, you don't want things to sound stiff on the clarinet. So this time I'll do ghost tongue and you'll still hear the note. So I'll do that, and then if that's like a long time till the next note, then I'll actually stop the note. Okay, so you don't need to be that exact, but say if you have a bunch of dot kind of quarter notes in a row, I think it sounds good to do it with this. Maybe not as a member of a big band section, like on the saxophone, not the clarinet, but as a soloist, I just find that for whatever reason that sounds better and sounds less stiff and classical and more in line with jazz. Ghost tonguing just seems to automatically improve my time feel and stuff, but that could be a very personal thing for me. I know a big part of time feel is the weight of your notes, the way your timbre is, the way your reed is, the way your mouthpiece is, and the distance in time between when you feel like you're physically starting the note and when it actually comes out of your instrument. So that's the problem with playing big mouthpieces that are loud and resistant, is it makes it harder to control when, at what point in time the note actually comes out, you know. But in any case, I've found that when I do things by punching on the clarinet, it can get obnoxious if you're not in the exact right situation for that. So anyhow, let me try to demonstrate some stuff, and I'll try to use all of this, I guess. All right, so here we go.